summer fade and winter draw near, my Lord, in your presence I live without fear. Through tempests, through snows, through turbulent tide, the touch of your hand is my strength and my guide. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. The dancers will pass, the singing must end. I welcome the darkness with you for my friend.
Well, today we are gathered on an occasion of dual meaning, dual celebration. One is that it is Easter, and the other is that it is close to the anniversary of Swamiji's passing 1 year ago. I wanted to talk a little bit about Easter because some of you may not be familiar with the story of Easter or some of the meanings that Yoganandaji gave to it. In India, we have to explain sometimes Christmas and Easter that are Christian holidays. And of course in America, we have to explain Deepavali and Ram Navami and Navaratri and Krishna Jayanti, and then so you have it easy. You only have to hear about two: Christmas, Easter. Americans have it much harder. And so the occasion of Easter is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. After he was killed, then he was resurrected. And I wanted to tell you a little bit of that story, and again, what Master said about it. What had happened was Jesus had a very dramatic and visible life. When the avatars come, sometimes they come and make a very big splash on the world stage, and sometimes they come and more quietly send their blessings and change the world in that way. Babaji, for example, is an avatar, still living, and he's inspired many millions of souls, but very few have seen him, and it isn't that the whole world even knows of his existence. Yoganandaji too came as an avatar to bring a message, but he lived a more or less not obvious, but typical life in certain ways, and he had a great impact in his time, but still, it was his message was to show us how to integrate this into our daily lives and how to bring spirituality and penetrate it throughout society. Now, when Jesus came, he was standing strongly against the established order of his day, both the religious order of the Jews and also the political order where he was living, in that case, of Rome. And so he came to uplift the Jews. He didn't come to start a new religion or to fight against them or anything like that, but say, as all great souls come, to say, a correction is needed. Not that, everybody's wrong and has been wrong till now, but rather we need a course correction. We see that in Indian teachings all the time, that Shankara comes and says that everything is Advaita. Nothing really exists at all, and there's non-duality, and nothing exists but God. But then others come and say, well, but though that's true, it's okay to have a personal I and thou relationship. And then another saint like Chaitanya comes and says, look, forget all this philosophy. Harar Nam Kevalam, just God's name only is necessary to free you, and so on. So each time the masters come for the needs of the people at that time. That's why it's helpful to look at avatars who have come more recently, in times closer to our own. Nevertheless, in the time of Christ, again, very dramatic story up till then. I can't tell it all because then it would take the whole satsang. But essentially, it all came to a head, and tragically, he was crucified. Now, it's important to remember that the true message of Christianity is not the crucifixion, but the resurrection. And sometimes seeing Christ on the cross, we can kind of look at that and kind of mistake. No, I think it's the crucifixion, because that's the image that's portrayed. In some churches, you'll see a different crucifixion, a crucifix portrayed. There's the crucifix, but you see Christ like this, almost as if he's stepping off of it, full of light and full of a bright smile, and it shows his transcendence from that experience. And what was that experience? Before he was killed, he said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, this city, he said, thou that stonest the prophets, throw stones at the prophets, and curse those who would help you. He said, how often I would love to gather you up into my arms like a mother hen, her babies, but thou wouldst not, meaning you would not come. And so he was feeling, I'm only here to help you, and yet you reject me. And so he felt sad for them. He didn't feel personally rejected, obviously. He was free in God. What did he care? Personally, for himself, nothing. Similarly, when he was crucified, and much is made of his suffering on the cross, and he did suffer tremendously, but not physically. Not at all physically. How could he be a master? How could he later resurrect his body? I mean, shows you how much control he had over his body, and then physically succumb to pain in that time. It doesn't make sense. It couldn't be. How could he be a divine being? Master showed that control to the disciples many times, and in one time they were moving a heavy wishing well, and it slipped and fell and crushed part of his foot. And he said he automatically winced with pain. I mean, obviously, some bones were broken. And then he said, I'm going to show you something. He said, I'm going to put my mind here. And as soon as he did, his face completely relaxed, and he could walk normally and speak to everyone just fine. He said, now I'll bring my mind back to the body. And instantly, the signs of pain were evident on his face, and he could barely even stand. So the masters have to it takes effort for them to bring their minds down to the level of the body. Swamiji has said it takes just as much effort for them to come down to our level as it takes for us to come up to their level. So the Good Friday is the day that Christ was crucified. And I've always wondered, why is it called Good Friday? I mean, you would think it should be called Awful Friday or Wretched Friday. And it's hard to say, Happy Good Friday to each other. What we can do is honor what's coming, which is Sunday, the resurrection. So that's what happened, that Christ was crucified on Friday, and before he was killed, he said, if you destroy this temple, in 3 days I will build it up again. And those with insight understood that he was speaking of the temple of the body. And so on that third day, all the disciples of his went into hiding, all the men, because if this is what the established power did to the guru, what would they do to the disciples? They all hid. The women were perhaps both more courageous and also safer, sort of politically speaking. And so, but one of his most devoted disciples, Mary Magdalene, went to his tomb just to be as close to him as she could. And we can all relate to that. If the guru, they had sealed him in a cave and put a big stone in front. And you can imagine wanting to be as close as you can to the guru after his passing. She came and she found the stone was removed. And she went inside and found there was no body. And so she obviously assumed that his body had been stolen. And so she came to the other disciples and she said, because she knew where they were hiding, and she said, they have taken the Lord. And everyone was upset because, this was, an awful insult. And then Jesus began appearing to different ones of the disciples. And then then Mary was walking around just distraught, worried about where had her guru gone. And this man came up to her and said, "Mary," and she just, wondered how he knew her name, but she was just too upset to even care really. And he said, "Mary," and she just thought, "Why is this person bothering me?" And then he said, "Mary," and she looked, and she saw it was Christ. And so she came again, and she said, "He is risen." And think about it. Imagine meeting a resurrected person now. Even now it would be like, wow, that's quite a shock. I wasn't expecting that on Sunday morning. And so just imagine it back then. This is, again, deep Kali Yuga. The only thing that exists is matter, is the thinking then. And so we are the body. The body dies, we die, that's it. We might have different philosophies and so on, but come on. All we see is the body. All we know is the body. And people don't even live all that long. And so when the body is the reality, the ultimate proof of divinity is to just show how the body is nothing but a puppet, an instrument, a tool, that this soul, this consciousness survives, transcends. The body can be resurrected. What a shock that would have. And so she came back with this news, and one of the disciples, whose name was Thomas, had this habit of doubting. I think he was a tax collector, wasn't he? So I don't know if those two are related, but no, I'm kidding. But he was, critically minded and analytical and always doubting, yeah, I don't know. And so he's a great saint also, so I don't mean any disrespect. But the other disciples, she was saying, "He's risen," and they said, "Abadiya." But he said, "I don't believe it." He said, "Not until I see him myself, put my hand in the wound," the wound in my finger in his wound, where the nails were put in the cross, and also in his side where he was stabbed with a spear. "Then I will believe, not before." And then, if not in that moment, soon after, Christ appeared in the midst of them. And I think he said, "Peace be unto you." Is that what he said? "Peace be unto you," he said to all of them. And just imagine, you can imagine it. Master just appeared right here. Swamiji appeared right here. And especially back then. So they just were completely taken. And he said, "Thomas, put your hand here. Put your hand in my side." And Thomas said, "My Lord and my God." So his doubt was completely transformed into deep faith. I say this, it's not totally irrelevant. I guess we're all celebrating today. It's not totally irrelevant it's not irrelevant at all, but of course Thomas who Santome is named after, and Thomas's crypt is Santome Church. It's right there. And Little Mount is where he was crucified. So it's amazing how specific and personal in a way this message is. Maybe I should wait for Madam. So it's important to remember, though, that Jesus' resurrection was not unique in history, that a soul would resurrect itself. Even in Autobiography of a Yogi, Master writes about how Lahiri Mahashaya resurrected himself, how Sri Yukteswar resurrected himself. And so, but the fact that Christ did it at such a dark time, and after having such a public life and such a public execution, was really tremendous. Now, what does it mean for us? And again, there's a slight bit of, it's a little gruesome, the whole story. And again, but that was the kind of dramatic message that was needed to make an impact then. You couldn't come and just sort of, chant Om and expect people in those days, all this violence and difficult things. Anyway, I won't go more into it right now. But just to say, it had to be big to make an impact. And so, for us, the message is, in fact, Swamiji titles the reading for this Sunday, if we were to focus only on Easter, Resurrection for Every Soul. Each one of us has that ultimate destiny to be resurrected, to be liberated, to be freed from the body's imperatives. And so we should always have that thought before us. First of all, our own personal liberation, our freedom in God, but also our resurrection from every test. Whatever test we go through and where we feel personally crucified, we should say, okay, I can relate to the crucifixion, but I'm remembering the resurrection. I know that it's coming. I know that my rebirth, not my rebirth in that sense, but my freedom, my birth in the soul, my birth in God is coming. And we can hasten that process by embracing it. Even Christ said before the crucifixion, He said, "Let this cup pass from me." He was praying to God, "Let this cup pass from me." And it wasn't that He was saying, "I'd rather not be crucified." He was saying He knew what it would do to the disciples. He knew also what it would do to the people who crucified Him. Because do you think it was good karma to crucify Christ? No, it was not good karma at all. And He even said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And Master said, that's why I love Him so much, that in the midst of all of that, He said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And we should remember that too in our lives. Whenever anyone is doing anything to us that is extremely hurtful, we can remember, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." You say, well, maybe you can remember that, but I don't think I can remember that. No, I'm kidding. Think of it though, it's easy. When a child is disrespectful or repeats something that they heard on television that's rude or something like that, and we're shocked, a small child especially, we realize, the kid can't possibly understand how offensive that is, or they couldn't possibly be really assessing my weaknesses and poking at me. They don't really know what they're saying. I can't treat them as if it were an adult saying it to me. As Swamiji said, it's relative. If a kid comes up to you and says, "Bang, bang, bang," you kind of go, maybe better not. But if an adult comes up to you with a toy gun and says, "Bang," you might think a bit. And it's suddenly not funny anymore. So again, but remember that we have to forgive them, for they know not what they do. We've got the laughing corner over here. It's Swamiji's example of that. It's very important to remember that. People really don't know what they're doing when they're hurting us. And again, it's God through them that is helping us to become more and more free. Do you think we can crank the AC down a little bit in temperature? So, now coming to Swamiji's passing, I want to share with you a little bit of the story that led up to it, and also, of course, its significance. The first thing is, Master told Swamiji, Swami asked him, "When will I find God?" And Master said, "At the end of life, but don't think about it." And I think one of the reasons why Master said don't think about it is because there was a lot of work that remained for Swamiji in this world. And he said, if I were in Samadhi all the time, I wouldn't be able to do all this work. I mean, who would care if you're just drenched in bliss all the time? What does it matter what happens in this world of Maya? But it matters very much to those of us who are still struggling to get free of Maya. We need help. And so that is the case, that when Swamiji left the body, he was free by Master's words. And so I think he was free even before that time. We don't know exactly when, but certainly at the end. And so he had gone through, we were telling the story of his life throughout the satsangs this month. This satsang doesn't fall in the chronological sequence, because now we're talking about the very end. In next week we will finish the missing piece from 1990 to 2013. And so he had been through a lot of tests. Physically, his body was always troubling him. And for most of us, and the most recent videos of him means the past even 6 to even 10 years, you see how physically frail his body was. And even before giving a talk, he would, sometimes he would come to give a talk. In one case, he came in an ambulance, gave the talk, and then left again in the ambulance back to the hospital. because he was so committed. I have promised to give people this talk, and so he did. But his body was always troubling him, and he would get up to speak. We wouldn't know how he would ever do it. Be it fever, pneumonia, all kinds of problems. And then as soon as he would sit down and open his mouth, all this energy would pour out. And then he would come back from the experience fine. And so we began to get used to these physical dramas that would happen every time he would either shift from one place to another, meaning from like America to Italy or to India, and every time he would begin to speak, be getting ready for a lecture, some kind of Maya basically would try to stop it. And so he was in India, as you know, here in Chennai in January, and then he spoke in that was his last major talk. He also spoke in Calcutta after that, but it was a much smaller venue, and there was actually a strike at that day, so it was very hard for people to make it to the venue. And so from Calcutta, he was able to visit Master's home, 4 Garpar Road, and which Master talks about in Autobiography of a Yogi. And then he flew to Mumbai to do some filming for a movie that he was in. And it was a very difficult journey, very hard on him physically. And he sort of went downhill in his health. And we would always see him sort of like the phoenix resurrecting from the ashes. He would go down and come up and go down and come up. And this time his health went down, and it didn't quite come back fully. And so by the time he left India, which was March 10th of 2013, so he celebrated the Mahasamadhi of Master, and those of you who were here yesterday saw the talk that he gave. Then he flew to Italy, and it was very cold, unusually cold in Italy, and so he was keeping to himself. He became more and more withdrawn, and we had seen Swamiji go through periods like that before, but this was unusual even for normal, in the sense that he didn't go out shopping, he didn't visit all the shopkeepers, he didn't spend all the time with people that he normally did. He gave the Sunday service in Italy, one of them in April, and then he gave another one at the end of March, in March, end of March, and then he gave the Easter service in Italy. And you can imagine in Italy, which is in some ways one of the hearts of Christianity, what a big celebration Easter is. And you're going to get to not just imagine it, but experience some of it in a moment when I play you some excerpts from that. But after that talk, he then again went into a period of virtual seclusion. But right before he left the body, he had everyone over, and they all had a nice tea, and he even went out shopping and went to see all of his old friends, because he made good friends with all the shopkeepers and so on. And then and I think it was the day before his passing, he had everybody over again for tea one more time, and some of them talked about they could see how withdrawn he was. And then it was the next morning that he came to let me see. Should I tell this story now? No, I don't think I'll tell this story now. I'll first I will tell it. But this Easter service, I wanted to play a few excerpts for you, but they're in Italian. So there are subtitles, but just in case you can't read the subtitles from too far away, I'm giving you a transcript of what it is. So if you can read the subtitles, read those, because at least you can see Swamiji. Otherwise you can listen to the Italian and read this, or you can just go with the flow and read this later at your leisure sometime. But if you could make sure everybody gets one.
Preghiamo insieme. Madre Divina, io sono tuo figlio, buono o cattivo, io sono tuo, aiutami a conoscerti. Amen. Allora, ma ci sono molte persone qui. Prima voglio che Sahaja lesse una lettera che ho scritto a tutti in inglese lei ha tradotto.
Dear ones, I wish I could bless each and every one of you with a happy Easter. Easter is a time symbolizing the eventual resurrection of our little individual selves into the one infinite self. I suggest at this time particularly that you study and meditate on the photograph of Master titled The Last Smile. That's this photo here. And consider this amazing fact. He knew that in just a few moments he would be leaving his physical body forever. There is no thought of self in his eyes, of personal regret, of sorrow. Clearly visible in his eyes and in his facial expression is his unconditional love for all mankind, his readiness to return again and again, as he put it, as long as one stray brother sits weeping by the wayside. Such love for ego-centered humanity is not even conceivable. And this was the love Jesus too felt for all humanity. People weep for him in his suffering on the cross. His suffering was only for humanity that blindly rejects God's love and substitutes for it vengefulness and hatred. I have been going through a personal Armageddon. Nothing in this world attracts me anymore. Nothing at all holds any pleasant memories. None of those experiences, whether interpersonal or outward in any way, holds the slightest attraction for me. Must I really live another 5 years, as has been predicted for me? I confess the very idea appalls me. I have done so much in my life to please God. The very hallmark of my nature has been enthusiasm, even though I've been always aware that I could never really accomplish anything significant in this world. Suddenly now I feel bereft of that enthusiasm. Maybe it's because my heart feels very tired. I want only to merge in God. The only lingering thought is that I would like to bring all of you with me. No, I am far from tired of you. I want only your freedom in God. But no, your worldly attachments, identities, and desires, I have to confess, mean simply nothing to me, as my own mean nothing to me. No, this doesn't mean I love you less. I love you much more, for I love that part of you which is eternally real. But whether I succeed or fail in my projects is to me meaningless. All the things I once considered pleasurable are to me now displeasing. I want nothing that this world has to offer. People tell me I am famous. That phrase to me also is meaningless. People often marvel at all that I have been able to accomplish in this life. To me, it all seems only dust. If we must resurrect our souls, let it be from the delusion that anything in this cosmic dream holds some worthwhile reality for us. We are children of God. That is our soul reality. Love, Swami. So this skips ahead a little bit.
È molto importante che uno cerca di migliorarsi. E una volta un discepolo di Yogananda ha detto: maestro, io non penso che ho un molto buon karma. Lui ha risposto con molta fermezza: ci vuole molto buono karma, anche per voler trovare Dio. Allora voi avete tutti questo tipo di karma, altrimenti non sareste qui. Però non perdere questo karma. Cerca sinceramente. Sembra difficile. Non è una vita facile. Ci sono tante tentazioni. Le scritture dicono che quando troviamo Dio c'è la beatitudine. E poi l'uomo dice: finalmente forse, però adesso ci sono questi piaceri, queste tentazioni. Perché aspettare tanto tempo? Perché non godermi adesso? Però se tu puoi rifiutare le tentazioni di illusione, tu poco a poco arrivi. Non è una cosa che devi soltanto trovare per te stesso, è una cosa che tu vuoi. Questa è una bella cosa nelle comunità che abbiamo fondato, perché certe persone vengono col desiderio di che c'è in questo per me, e tu puoi vedere che queste persone non sono mai così felici che coloro che dicono io voglio solo Dio. E a poco tu puoi vedere per l'esempio degli altri che vivere per Dio ti dà più felicità. Dice nella Bhagavad Gita, anche il più grande peccatore del mondo, se cerca Dio, se medita, se pensa a Lui, lo troverà. Non è soltanto una possibilità, è impossibile di evitare questo tuo destino. Allora Pasqua, pensa agli altri, pensa al fatto che Pasqua è un risveglio di anima e cerca di condividere questa bellezza con gli altri. Quando tu vedi uno che soffre, gli occhi piangono o duri, cerca di dargli una lancia di gioia, dai un sorriso. Io ho visto molte volte, quando vedo uno straniero, io cerco di dargli un po' di gioia, e ho visto che cambia. E più recentemente ho visto che le persone che prima di io sorridono, loro sorridono a me. Allora cerca di essere strumenti per questa gioia divina. Tu vedrai che così verrà una gioia che non troverai altro. Servire Dio negli altri e servire te stesso negli altri. La gioia è l'unica cosa che tutti cercano. Ogni uomo nel mondo vuole la felicità, è vero, no? Un mafioso forse vuole la felicità, potere, distruggere. Perché? Perché pensa che così solo lui troverà la felicità. Alla fine trova che danneggiare gli altri non ti dà felicità. Poi cerca la felicità in soldi. Tu vedrai alla fine che i soldi non ti fanno felice. Tu cerchi e finalmente tu trovi che aiutare gli altri, amare Dio, avere ideali nella vita. Tu trovi a poco che queste sono le cose che ti danno più gioia. E quando cerchi questa felicità, tu troverai la gioia. E nel trovare la gioia, tu troverai una beatitudine che è eterna. Questo è tuo. E io voglio niente più di questo per tutti voi. Vi amo in questo. E tu devi amare tutti. E nell'amore di Dio, perché Lui ti ama. Se tu capissi quanto Lui ti ama, tu moriresti di gioia? Io non posso rimanere, allora continuate voi.
And so, of course, it's very significant that his last words in his public lecture were, "I can't remain, so you all continue." And in many different ways, he was giving us warnings that he would be going soon. And talking so much about Master's Mahasamadhi, Master about to leave the body, him in that letter you can hear obviously how literally withdrawn he was from the world. In addition to that, he had lost hearing in his left ear, and he had lost hearing in his right ear long ago, but his left ear was okay. And then suddenly overnight the left ear lost all its hearing. And that was also very difficult for him, because even with hearing aids, even with anything, he found it very difficult to hear. Right at the end, his hearing improved a little bit, but still. He was trying to warn us in different ways, but it was a complete and utter shock, partly because he had received a prophecy from Agastya that said he would live until 91. And I mean, I have to confess, I was there when this prophecy was being read to him. And so it said, in your 84th year, this will happen. What it does is each year of your life, it tells you what will happen. And so in your 84th year, this will happen. And then it had been predicted previously that Brigu had said he would leave the body at 84. So when they said, in your 85th year, I thought, now, is that 85th by Indian reckoning, in which case then it's really 84? I don't know. And then it said in your 86th year, I said, 86 means 86 or 85, but it doesn't mean 84. So in your 87th year, 88th, 89th, 90th, 91st year, I was thrilled. We get all this extra time. And he kept saying, I've been cursed with all these extra years of life. I just don't want it. And so we all just chuckled and said, well, sorry, sir, but we all do. So, and Agastya said it would be. So we were, in a way, very confident, many of us. And some people, I think, had a sense, though, that it was coming. But what happened was he was at the breakfast table, and he was having some difficulty physically. And he went and he checked his email. He was always writing to people, all kinds of people, not just, maybe just the long-time members, but he would answer many letters personally. And then, of course, through Lakshman, his secretary, and Swami Lakshman and others, they would help him answer letters. But any letter that anyone received from Swamiji, even if Swamiji didn't write the first draft, he read through and corrected every single letter before it went out to someone. So it always came from him. And so he was at the breakfast table, and he was having trouble breathing, and then his body tensed like this in a wave like that, just a wave of tension moving up the body, and then it completely relaxed. But then they noticed he wasn't breathing. And so they brought him over to his bed, and when he had trouble breathing, they had known the medical procedure of rolling him from one side to the other and so on. And his breathing came, and every now and then it was shallow, and then it was gone. And of course they started weeping, and then Kirtani, who was there, mentioned, Swamiji's master said Swamiji would be free at the end of his life, and so he's free at this moment, and let's meditate on that. Let's try to feel that blessing that's occurring right at this moment. And so that helped people. Meanwhile now, all of us here in other parts of the world had no idea any of this was happening. It was quick. And so even a friend of mine said, I have an intuition that when he goes, it's going to be quick. And she said this to me just a few weeks before he left the body, and I wondered if in a way God wasn't warning me. Because, I can talk about it now, but it was a very traumatic thing, as you can imagine. And we just got the news by email. And I read there was a few emails coming out, please pray for Swamiji, he's having health trouble. These would come often, and we would pray. I read the last one first. And I was completely devastated. And so it was late at night in the U.S., and I woke up Dharmini, and I just tried to tell her what happened, and I completely broke down. And she said, well, but that means he's free. So let's meditate on that freedom. And I tried, but I couldn't. I could only just cry. She was tuning in more to that freedom, and again, of his soul, but I was just tuning into my loss. And I was just beside myself, especially because another reason why it was a shock is because he had asked Dharmini and me to come to Italy to see him before coming to India. And so on our way to Chennai, we were to be in Italy for about 2 months. And so we were preparing all to that. We were supposed to leave for Italy in just 7 days. So 7 days before our departure for Italy, this happened. And so the next morning, was Sunday morning. It was Easter Sunday. No, it wasn't Easter Sunday, but it felt like it. But it was Sunday morning. And we had the astral ascension ceremony for Swamiji, led by Jyotish and Devi. And I was still so upset. And I was too upset in the sense that I knew that I would want to look back on this time and feel that I was tuning into the blessings of it. And I didn't want to just have, be so emotional that I couldn't feel the blessings. And so I prayed to Swamiji, how can I feel more calmness? And before that, I had just said, Swamiji, you've left us. And I heard, almost as if he was speaking in my ear, him saying, I haven't gone anywhere. But it didn't help. I was still heartbroken. So then this lasted. The next morning, I'm trying to calm down. I prayed and I said, Swamiji, how can I calm down? And it was as if he was saying, Dharmaraj, I'm right here. So, you can feel sad, or you can feel me. And so, with that thought, I was able to calm down. And then I instinctively in my mind prayed, and I just said, Swamiji, I'm so glad you're here. And again, it was as if he was answering, I've always been here. And I realized he wasn't saying I've always been in this temple where, the expanding light temple where we were. But I've always been with you. I've always been with each one of you. And in a way, he trained us for this by being in different parts of the world. He would be in India for months, Italy for months, America for months. And when he wasn't in the same country as we were, we would have to tune into him mentally. We would have to attune to master through him. And we worked on developing that. It wasn't that he was always around us. And so in a way, we were ready to do that. And we found that that presence was not only continuing, but was stronger. And it was a shock, because everyone else in my life, whenever they've left the body, they've left. And you might have a dream about them, and they might say goodbye, or they may appear to someone else and have a message for you. But then that's basically it. And in Swamiji's case, he has just continued and continued and continued. One woman wrote recently that she was missing him so much at this 1-year anniversary. She was praying very hard to him, please come to me in a dream. It's an interesting prayer, one worth considering. And that night she had a dream of him, and she was sitting with him. She had been very sick also, that I should have mentioned that. She had a high fever, she had all these body pains, she had been ill. And that was another reason she was feeling really badly. And that night he came to her in a dream and just was sitting with her and laughing just like the old times, because she had been with him in Gorgan before. And when she woke up from the dream, she was 90% healed. She said everything went away, all the symptoms went away. And another person was about to have surgery and she had had surgery, and you'll read this in Nayaswami Devi's letter if you haven't already read it. She had all kinds of complications and was back in the hospital, and she was praying to Swamiji, help me. And suddenly his face appeared to her. And then she knew she would be all right, and she was all right. So you see, that consciousness was not created by that body any more than it was for Jesus Christ, any more than it was for Master. And so he's just as present for us now. Now when we talk about Master's Mahasamadhi, it doesn't have the same poignancy necessarily for us, because, it happened over 60 years ago. And we feel his presence, and it's all we've ever known, and it's all we've ever really had the possibility of knowing. Swamiji was so close to us in time. And this is only 1 year. Relative to Master, this would be like it's 1953, 1 year after his passing. It's still so fresh. On the other hand, it also means the blessings are very strong. I don't think they'll diminish. But it's important to remember, Swamiji said, Master is more real for me now, he said at the end of his life, than he was back when I was with him. Because it is the Guru's consciousness working inside your consciousness, awakening it. It is God, through the Guru, drawing out the God in the disciple. That's the Guru's only purpose. Christ had no interest in gathering people to himself. He came to show people what they could be and to help them become that. He said to his disciples, the miracles I have done, you will do, and greater things. And it's important to remember that though, yes, Jesus resurrected Lazarus, who was dead and came back to life, so one of his disciples also resurrected someone. And so it seems like such a big deal, but it shows that power was passed on, because that power is inherent in each one of us. And so similarly, the Guru lives in you. And it's not just romantic or poetic or, well, that's nice, and if we think of someone, then they live on in memory. They live on in reality when they're in avatar. Master said, to those who think me near, I will be near. I think in Swamiji's case, he will be near to us whether we think of him or not. He has a vested interest in what's happening at Ananda. He has a vested interest in each one of you, especially in Chennai. Chennai was the last center he founded during his lifetime, just months before he left. So, God bless all past and God bless all future. And he will be founding other centers too. But in the body, by his words, we must have a center in Chennai. Chennai was the last one. And so it's also, you can think of it as the first one of this new era. So it's very special and a particular blessing we have. So again, just like St. Thomas is not abstract but right down the road, so Swamiji with Chennai too, it's very particular to all of us here and to Chennai also. But remember, Swamiji was only acting as a vehicle for Master. He always said, I am not the Guru, Master is the Guru. So we say, okay, fine, look to Master. Then Master always said, I am not the Guru. They are not my disciples, they're God's disciples. He said, I killed Yogananda long ago. No one dwells in this temple now but God. And similarly, it's the same thing with Babaji too. You can see that Babaji sent Master to the West. And remember also, because we think, but Babaji sent Master to the West and now Master's back here. But did Babaji mean for him to come back here? First of all, yes, because he came back here. So therefore, it was meant. But also, remember the words of Swami Ramatirtha. He was one of the first yogis to go to America. It's a beautiful story about he was landing, I think, in New York on a ship. And this American came up to him and said, so, what is your name and where are you from and so on. And he looked a little out of sorts. You can imagine this yogi on the ship back in the early 1900s. He came, I think, just before or after Vivekananda. And the man said to him, do you have any money? And Ramatirtha said, no. He said, do you have a place to stay? No, do you have a place to stay? He said, no. He said, do you have any money? He said, no. He said, well, do you have any friends in America? And Ramatirtha said, I have one. And the man said, who is it? And Ramatirtha said, you. And the man was so charmed by him that he sponsored his whole tour in America. And so, but Ramatirtha also said, someday you Americans will take these yoga teachings and make them practical and then bring them back to our country. So he foresaw that. Now, just to this other point about the Guru being in you, and again, we look up the chain of avatars and Guru of the Guru of the Guru, but still, they are just trying to awaken that God in us. Though I can't resist telling this story, because the Guru that's in front of you, in the body, when Swamiji was in front of us in the body, well, he kind of just looked like a human being, if that's all you were seeing. And so, you could have all kinds of opinions about him. He said, in a way, first the same was true of Master. People resisted Master. After all, I have my own feelings and thoughts. And he said to us, in a way, it's easier for you to not be in the body, to not have Master in the body, because it forces you to tune in to him inwardly. He said when he was in the body, people would get distracted by, well, is he in me? But he's also right there. At one point, Swamiji was going through that, saying, okay, he's right there, but he's inside of me also. So where is he? And he was kind of struggling with this, and Master came up to him and gave him an apple. And Swamiji said part of that was just symbolizing, look, you can have a human relationship with me also. But, people would sometimes say to Swamiji, well, I'm going to pray to Master about it, and so on. Now, it is good to consult your own intuition and so on. But in many cases, it was just, I don't listen to what you say, I only listen to what Master says. And we think, okay, well, then in Master's life, it was the same way. There was a nun. He was talking to the nun in her room, and he was scolding her and telling her, you've got to do this. And then he walked out of the door, and she was so mad, and she prayed to Babaji, just saying, ah. And Master opened the door and said, no fare going over my head. But it is the Guru trying to bring out that God that's inside of you. He has no other purpose, no other goal. I had read this story that's in the Bhagavatam about, I think it's called the Avadhut. It's Avadhuda. Avadhut. That's Avadhut. That was the thing. See, it's a problem when you read and don't say. So I thought it was fascinating, this man who said he had like 20 gurus, and he learned, for example, that he saw a woman washing something and her bangles were tinkling, and then she kept taking them off, but still they were making sounds, and finally she took off all but one, and then there was no noise. And the guru of the bangle taught him that when people are gathered, they will chat and make noise, but when you are alone, then you can keep silence. And so on. So all these beautiful things, I thought it's fascinating, what a thought, and so on. Then when I met Swamiji, and for the first time, and I said to him, sir, I feel that in a way it's not fair that I didn't get to be with Master in the body, and I don't even really get to be with you in the body, in the sense that I wanted, if he was in Italy, which is where he was, I wanted to just move to Italy and be there. But I had been sent or asked by him, in fact, no, not by him, but confirmed by him to be a school teacher in Palo Alto in California, and not go and just sit at his feet and just bring him tea all day. That's all I wanted to do. And he said, no, your duty lies there. But he said, God gives you what you need. And don't be like the greedy man that looks at the platter and not at his plate. And as Master said, he had a greedy boy who would always be eyeing the platter of all the food he was going to miss, not realizing that, in fact, Master had already doubled his portion. He had told the cooks, give him, as Master said, give him twice. But so Swami said, don't look at the platter, look to your plate. He said, God gives you what you need, and when you need more, He will give you more. And I thought, okay, I need more. But it didn't work that way. And in time, it did, but not right away. And so then he said, and anyway, the Guru is inside of you, and you know the story of the man who had 20 gurus. He learned from the stone, and he learned from the bangle, and all these things. I said, yeah, okay, fine. Still, I just want to be with you. I don't want just to be with philosophy. But yes, I know that story, and yes, it was significant to me. And I just assumed that, this was just the man with the 20 gurus that Swami talked about all the time. I knew it, he knew it, it's general culture, you knew it. And it was only years later that I realized I never heard Swamiji tell that story. In any of the talks that he gave, I never heard him say that. In any of the talks, the recordings I'd heard in the past, I never heard him mention the story once. I never saw him mention it in any of his writings. I never heard anyone who heard the story from Swami. And I had just accepted it in turn that, he just mentioned this story like everyone knows. And so I realized he was saying, I know that you know that story because I'm inside of you. And again, He's inside each one of us, guiding us. He, Master, God, guiding us to our own perfection. And so though we resist, though we take 2 steps forward, 1 back, don't worry, they know. They've been very patient with us all this time. They will continue to be. But the more open we can be, the more quickly we will graduate. That's all they're trying to do, is help us to graduation. And so I wanted to close by playing for you a recording, showing you a slideshow of Swami and playing for you a recording of at Swamiji's memorial service, which was held at Ananda village about a month after his passing. Just to tell you, I should finish that story just personally. Here we had these tickets to go to Italy, but we were going, if we had flown, we would have flown a week late. His funeral was going to be the next day. And so we called the airline, and it was amazing because we had booked frequent flyer tickets. It's the only way we could have flown there. And to change a frequent flyer ticket to, from a week, to change a ticket normally, instead of flying a week from now, I have to fly tomorrow. You can imagine how expensive that is, even to change it, much less to buy it. But frequent flyer ticket doesn't cost anything. In fact, the lady said, geez, you were flying through Germany and you had to pay the German international transaction fee or whatever, and now you're flying direct, so you don't even have to pay that. So it almost costs you nothing to change this ticket. Not bad. And then I said, I need a ticket. There's been a death in the family. I need to go. She said, okay, excellent. That flight is full, but I found one seat on the plane. Rende? I said, but my wife has to come with me. And she said, oh, okay, let me see. And I thought, well, what do you mean, let me see? You said there's one seat. What are you going to do? We can't share. And, how are you going to, does the pilot have an extra seat? How do you find an extra seat if there's not an extra seat? And I said, Swamiji, we have to come. We have to come. And then there was this long pause, and she said, there's another seat. And then she said, you must be meant to go. And so we were able to go and attend the funeral and be there. It was a week that we all spent there. People gathered from India, from America, all there. Then I should mention this pad here that you see on the floor, not on the floor, on this table here in front of the altar, was placed under his head when his body was in the casket, because his head had to be propped up slightly because the casket was a little too low. So this was folded up and propped up under there. And so right before they sealed the casket, Ananda, for those of you who know him, he's the spiritual director of Ananda, Italy, with Kirtani. He took this pad out and was holding it. And I thought, wow, what a brilliant idea that was, to put something in the coffin and then take it out. He didn't think that at all. He was just thinking to prop the Swamiji's head up a little more. This thing needed to be there. It's just a normal meditation pad that they have in the temple. And so I later saw him after they had sealed the casket, and then it went to the airport. And we were flying at the same time as the body was flying, not on the same flight, but all sort of traveling at the same time. And I said to him, that was smart. For the pet, he said, what? Oh, no, I just put this there. And he said, do you want it? Such a person. And I said, no, I don't. I can't accept that. And you're the one who had, no, you keep. He said, no, listen, we have all kinds of, Swamiji lived here. We have all kinds of relics of his. Take this for Chennai. He said, let this be one of the relics you bring to Chennai, bring of Swamiji back to India. So keep that in mind later when we have a flower ceremony of offering to Swamiji. So at his memorial service 1 month later, they played an excerpt of a talk of his that he gave at his 80th birthday. And so it's about an 8-minute talk, and so I'll play that for you now.